What's good, everybody? I'm Hand Rub Hayes. You can call me Zach. And welcome tonight to Hype DC Presents the Weekly Drop. Big thanks to Hype DC for helping us engineer this and hosting us tonight. Now, I'd like to introduce to the stage Steve Duck, the editor of the Weekly Drop, and the architect of incredible things, Stephen Smith.
Thanks for coming down, everyone. It's great to be here with my guest, Stephen Smith. We just want to shout out Hype DC. Thanks very much, Hype, for having us tonight, making this possible at the Weekly Drop Live. I see a lot of familiar faces in the crowd, but a lot of new faces too. So if this is the first time you've come down, thank you so much for signing up, for getting tickets, for supporting the event. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Let's introduce once again, let's make him welcome. Stephen Smith, please.
Hopefully I don't disappoint.
You won't disappoint, man. It'll be fine. I saw a lot of people wearing sneakers tonight that Stephen Smith has designed. Who out there is wearing something that Stephen Smith did? Right here? Right here? All right. I see you. Stephen's journey in sneakers has been, decades. Sorry, I don't mean to put you on blast like that, but he's been in the game a long time. He's designed for New Balance, for Reebok, for Fila, for Nike, and for Adidas. So it's a real privilege to have him here with us tonight. And tonight, I wanted to start the interview by going all the way back to your first placement in the biz at New Balance. When Stephen arrived at New Balance, they just finished up on the 990, and they were beginning on the 997. So, Stephen, at the time, you were just looking for an industrial design job, I assume, probably not specifically in sneakers. But can you talk to us about the process of going on board there at New Balance and taking that role?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I had run in the 990s in college, and it was one of my favorite shoes. I didn't know anybody designed them because at that point, nobody did. It was done by like pattern makers and shoemakers and cobblers, basically. And so when I graduated from college, I didn't know what I was going to do. And my parents are like, "You going to get a job?" And I'm like, "I guess so. I got to figure out what the hell I'm going to do and where I'm going to work." And so one of the guys who was the graduating senior the year before me lived up in Lawrence, where New Balance's R&D office was. And he's like, "Hey, I applied there when I got out of school, and they had a hiring freeze. And all of a sudden, a year later, they called me back, and I told them about you." He goes, I said, "Here's this guy. He's a super talented industrial designer. You might want to reach out to him." So I went and applied, and they called me, and I went up there, and it was in an old mill in Lawrence, Massachusetts from like 1902, and it was during the Reagan eras, so it was like Wall Street, everybody wearing button-down shirts and ties and three-piece suits and stuff to work, and that wasn't for me. And I went to New Balance, and the guy who interviewed me was this guy, Ron Clay, and he came out in a t-shirt and jeans, and of course, sneakers, and I was like, whoa, this is the place for me, I think. This is sweet, right? And so we talked, and he was like, "Can you do blueprint drawings, like mold drawings?" I'm like, "Absolutely," because I had minored in architecture, and where it's just like endless blueprint drawings and floor plans and layouts. And so I laid out all these tech drawings, and he's like, "Ooh, yeah, you can do that. Perfect." Right? And so he kind of showed me around the office a little bit, and then he was like, "Uh-oh, it's like 11:30, interview's over, we're all gonna go running," right? And I'm like, did I wake up in an alternate universe? I mean, you dress casual, you all go running, and then he's like, "Oh, by the way, what size are you?" I said, "Well, men's 9. He goes, "Sample size, perfect," right? And he's like, "Well, it's nice to meet you. You'll hear from us, and we'll let you know what we come out of it." So I went home. My parents were like, "How did it go?" I said, "Oh, it went pretty good, I think. I don't know." Then they called me the next day and offered me the job. And my parents were happy. Like, we got him out of the house. He's got a job. We didn't know what we were going to do with the kid with the art degree.
So a lot's changed, but not everything's changed.
Yeah. So I went there, and they were excited because I was only like the second actual industrial designer they ever had. It was me and this other guy, Kevin Brown, who had gone to Pratt. And he was only a year and a half older than me. So now they had these like two young kids as the whole design department for New Balance. So Brownie and I would look at the projects, and it was like, all right, you like basketball. Why don't you do the basketball shoes? I'm like, all right, I'll do the running shoes. I like to run. So that's kind of how we divvied up some of the projects. And so having had experience with the 900 series, they're like, oh, you should do that one then. So I did some perfs on the 995, and that was pretty cool. And I was like, well, that's kind of no-brainer. And then the next came, okay, we're going to update it to the 996. And that one I got to do a little bit more serious revamping of the model, did a super cushiony outsole, and that was the beginning for me where I learned from them, you don't just update it, you make it better every time. And that was the directive that was always ingrained in my head from New Balance was, don't just make it different, make it better every time. So that then fed into my whole career trajectory into innovation and advanced product, because it was always that mission of make it better. And
so that sort of shaped the person or the designer that you continue to be. And so you've spoken about working on the 996 and the 997. There's a lot of people tonight here in the 1500s. You worked on the 1500 as well. Was that a different process?
Yeah, that one was crazy because the 1300 had come out. It was at that time, so the numbers denoted the price points. So 990 was the first $99/$100 shoe. And so the numbers were actually delineations of the price in US dollars. And the 1300 had come out, and it did okay, but it didn't do amazing. And they're like, we're going to do the next 1300. And I think they were going to call it like the 1302 or something. And so we started to do all this sketching on this thing. And it looked really cool and had some really technical features in the midsole. They're like, we think we get $150 for this. Let's call it the 1500. And then it was part of a whole package we were going to do. We were going to do, and it was a first for New Balance to do this collection of $150 ultimate New Balance shoes. So we did the 1500 running shoe, 1500 tennis shoe, and then Brownie did the 1500 basketball shoe. And I had the good fortune that the running shoe was the one that went forward and the one that New Balance is most known for. But it was really cool because the molds and things that we did in it were so complex. The only people who could make those molds for us were the Japanese. So I got to work directly with New Balance Japan. They made the molds, and then we transferred them to Taiwan. And they were so they started to inject and make all the special midsoles in Taiwan. And at the time, it was state of the art. And you guys look at the stuff we do now. Air, and you have all the nice detailing and molding you can do on the midsoles, but that was new technology at the time. Everything else was straight cut and buff, like on a Reebok Classic of just the raw EVA, and that's all you had. So all of these technologies were coming into play, and it was an amazing time because, like, wow, we could mold it this way, we could make it that way, and it was a great time to innovate and create. And so I did 996, 997, 1500, 574, which came from the 675, and then that led to the 676 and 677. Pretty much all of the classic New Balance running shoes I did back in the day from 86 to 88.
It's an amazing legacy because I think that, I'm sure that New Balance have made several new models since you left. But if you were to walk into a store such as Hype, the New Balance that you see on the shelves are the 997, the 574, and the 1500, right? So it's all the stuff that you made.
Yeah,
it must be a great feeling.
It's crazy, and when I worked on these projects, I was pretty young, 21, 22 years old, and I looked at these things as my children, and I cared about creating them. I always looked at it, and this followed me through my whole career as well, is if I'm going to design something, I want the consumer to be as excited as I am. Like, would I pay $150 for this? You know, because I've seen some crappy shoes come out where like, really? You expect the consumer to pay $120? Because I always ask somebody, would you buy that shoe if you know, when they were designing it? And they're like, well, I don't know. I said, well, then you're not designing it good enough. You know, if you don't want it, then how the hell can you expect anyone else to want it? You know, and so that was another big driving factor in how my brain worked on these projects.
So it's funny that you made that connection in Japan, though. I'm assuming that was the first exposure you really had to working in the Japanese market at that time.
Yeah, it was really cool. That was through Moonstar, which was a trading company that worked with New Balance, that then became New Balance Japan. So they were doing some of their own product with these lightweight racing shoes and stuff, and those are the ones I wanted. I'm like, man, I got to have those. They're like, well, too bad, those are Japan only. And I'm like, I got to get those things.
That's an eternal struggle that we've dealt with for 30 years. Yeah. Okay, so moving on then, from New Balance, we will continue the story where you're at Reebok. And obviously that connection to Japan continues there as well. But what you're best known for at Reebok, of course, is being a part of the Reebok Advanced Concepts team and creating the Instapump Fury. Can you talk us through just the process of creating that classic sneaker?
Well, it was really interesting. This whole idea of having this dedicated advanced concepts team was all new. Nike had what they called APE, which is Advanced Product Engineering, and they were engineers, not necessarily a collective of design biomechanists and engineers all together. So we were kind of the first team like that of all of these combined disciplines. So Steve Burris, who I worked with at New Balance, left New Balance and went to Reebok and recruited me to be the first design lead for advanced concepts within this new team at Reebok. And so we had license from Paul Fireman to go just explore other things. We didn't have to be tied into shoe factories with what we were doing. So we went to aerospace shows. We went to Formula One car manufacturers. We went to biomedical trade shows and saw things that were not in shoes, but then figured out ways they could help us solve problems within shoes of making things lighter, better, stronger. Fit systems, air for pump came from that, from medical devices, from like blood pressure cuffs and things, because it was in that level of pressures that we were experiencing. You know, we couldn't allow failures for what we did, because you know, you pay $125 for your pump shoe. You didn't want it to burst or anything. So it was interesting at that same time. So we had Hexalite, Graphite, and the pump, and we were working on all of it together. And I looked at it with Litch, and we were like, what if we made, you know, rather than like make bits and pieces, let's make this concept car and just really mess with people and combine all of the stuff together and build this thing from the frickin' future that will blow people's minds. And that's where the Fury came from. I was in this mind-numbing meeting, you know, because I used to have to go to meetings. It'd be like, oh my God, just shoot me now. And I was doodling in my notebook, and I drew this little tiny thumbnail, and I showed it to Litchfield. So I drew the shoe, and then I drew the air bladder flattened out as if you would manufacture it. Because I'm a weird designer in that I'm an odd combination of artist and engineer in how my brain works. The two normally don't get along. And I nudge Litchfield. I'm like, yo, look at this. And he goes, holy shit, that's it. And so I drew it bigger so that other people could understand it, because those thumbnails were for me in my sketchbook. And we presented to Paul Fireman. He was like, whoa, that's it, boys, go. I don't care what it costs, just make it, you know. And so, you know, it took us almost 2 years to go from this sketch to make this thing. But the thing that people don't realize is a lot of that shoe, probably 60% of it was made in the USA, and Reebok doesn't talk about that now because a lot of it's all made in Asia, but the carbon fiber arch piece came from a place in California. The hexalite came from another place in California. The pump bladders were made at a place in Western Massachusetts. And then we sent it all over to Korea for the final assembly. But the other thing that we did with that, where the engineering side of my brain worked on this, was that we simplified the shoe. And the way we built the Fury, you can't take a part off it and have it still work, which was really cool. Like we condensed it down to the absolute essential components of it. And by removing all of the foam and reinforcers and all that other crap that we were paying for, it allowed us to reinvest it into the higher tech aerospace and biomedical materials that the shoe was made from at the time. So it was very revolutionary, and people internally resisted it because they're like, "What is that thing?" First of all,
and the colorway was your.
That's the way I drew it.
Right.
And I would get in fights with the marketing guy for running all the time, almost to the point of a fist fight, where, and now it's very funny. As I told the story over the years, it became the ad campaign for the relaunch of the classic colorway of "You Don't Get It, Do You?" Because I was fighting with the guy. I'm like, look, this shoe's for early adopters. It's got to be totally in your face. It can't be this thing that just kind of whispers, "Oh, hey, I'm the Pump Fury." It's got to like, look at the fucking Pump Fury, And so I always drew it like that. We made it like that. And he was like, "All right, we'll release that one, but you wait. We're going to do this, this gray, blue, black one, and you wait, it's going to outsell that thing 60-40. And he had come from New Balance after I had been there, and I'm like, "Dude, you ain't at New Balance anymore. You're at Reebok in the big leagues. You can't be making that boring shit." And
shots fired.
So the thing booked in 60% that one, 40% the boring colorway, and I'm like, who knew what they were doing?
And a legend was born.
But in the middle of all of that, I got so pissed at him, I took a pair home and I spray painted it with gray automotive primer, the whole thing. And I made it absolutely as boring as you possibly could. And I flung it on his desk. I said, "Is that what you want?" He's like, "That I can sell." And I was like, "You don't get it. You don't get it, do you? You don't get it." And in the end, who was right? The marketing guys, 25 years later, who's up here talking to you about it? It's me, not him. So it was...
The Weekly Drop Live 4, we're going to get the marketing guy. So sign up now. The tickets will go quick.
So then I kind of established a reputation of being kind of an asshole.
So one thing that we all know about the Instapump Fury, apart from the fact that it is a really wild sneaker, is that it's always been very popular in Japan. It's been consistently popular there, like an Air Force One or a Superstar or something like that. Do you have any sort of idea as to why that would be?
So coincidentally, at the time, we were working on this other project called pump cushioning, and it was underfoot pump bladder. We had a slide valve, so you could inflate just the forefoot or the heel of the midsole, and then it had an electronic pressure gauge, so you could coordinate your right and left foot to the same pressures, or if you had like an imbalance in your gait, you could play with it, and you could reset it. If you say 3.5 psi in the forefoot, but 4 in the heel, you could replicate it every time by having the pressure gauge. Like, oh, today I'm running on trail, so maybe I'll soften it up. And you could soften it up and go down to maybe 2.5. So at the time, we were still working on the Fury and multiple projects. So this one, I was traveling to Japan quite a bit because we were working with Alps, which is the parent company of Alpine Car Stereo, Sony, and Casio to make the electronic device because, the Japanese are the best at miniaturizing electronics. So we went to see them first. So I was traveling to Japan extensively for that. And then also, Lich and I were looking at this company called Japan Valqua, that did the same thing as Dielectrics, that did the RF welding to make the pump bladders, looking for a second source for a pump. And so I think that whole like super future vision of what Tokyo represented with, you know, Gundams and robots and this, you know, it's Japan. And so I think that was like subliminally ingrained into my psyche as I was designing this thing. And so I kind of credit that to it, that, you know, I was immersed in the culture and somehow I soaked it in like a sponge, and subliminally it's infused into that. So I think that's part of why it appeals to
you're able to
Japan.
communicate it without saying anything.
Yeah.
But people that are living that experience are able to just understand what you're trying to say through the design of the shoe.
Yeah.
That's wild. Another thing, at Reebok in the early 90s, they had quite a lot of basketball stars signed at the time. Shaquille O'Neal was in the office, I believe.
Yeah, it was pretty exciting. You know, we were trying to schmooze Shaq to get him to sign the deal. And if you never know the story, like he went to Nike and they kind of dissed him, but he came to Reebok and the whole company came out to greet him in the front lobby. And he was like, whoa, they're serious, right? And so, you know, part of schmoozing him, Paul Fireman was showing him all the great products that we were doing in the innovation group, you know, to show off his investment in us and his desire for us to create the future of Reebok and the next big thing. And so Shaq came with his mom and dad, and he showed him the Furies, and Shaq was like, oh, I got to try those out. We're like, dude, you're size 23. You know, it's like, we got 9s and 11s because that's what we've been developing. So it turned out his mom was like a size 13 men's. So we took the sock liner out of the size 11 that Peter Foley, the other development director, had on his feet. He took them off, and she crammed her size 13 into those things, and we pumped them up, and she was like, oh yeah, these are great. And so next thing you know, we got requested to make a pair for Shaq. So there's some small problem with that. So the welding die, that the machine that welds the pump bladders in, was only like this big. And so now you got to grade that thing up to like a size 23, and it really didn't quite fit. So we had to like cheese it, and then we didn't, you know, we didn't know what was going to happen when we made a carbon fiber arch that big. You know, all these things were just ridiculously huge. So Shaq's so big, like I don't know if you know what a Mercury Grand Marquis is. I mean, it's like the biggest of big American cars, like a Cadillac. And Shaq preferred those, and he drove it from the back seat. They just took the front seats out, and he sat on the actual back seat to drive the car. So it kind of gives you an idea of like how big the dude is. You know, and you'd see other basketball stars like Sabonis and that, and they were just tall and thin and weirdly proportioned. Shaq was like a normal person, just you put him in a copier and press enlarge, and it was just crazy what he was like. So he was a lot of fun to work with, and some of that early work we did on the Fury then set up the stage for some of the Instapump Shaq shoes and things that Reebok did later in the inline team.
So you made a good impression on Shaq, who became really the flagship athlete for Reebok for a long time.
Definitely.
Until Iverson came along. Just your time at Reebok Advanced Concepts. Obviously, that team created the Instapump Fury, which took a long time. But did the team create anything else, or was the team responsible for any other technology or innovation at Reebok?
So pretty much Pump had just launched, and so we ended up becoming the evolution of Pump team. So we made all of the next Pump bladders and versions and iterations because we became the experts in it. All the Instapump came from us. We had to make the inflator device, which was different because that wasn't a shoe, so you had to go outside the shoe industry again to make this weird mechanical device, but it was cool because it was back to real industrial design versus specifically sneaker design. So I got to design other machinery and equipment, so that was cool. We did DMX. We perfected Hexalite, ZigTech. Pretty much anything that Reebok had for a technology came from that little team of our group. It was pretty amazing. And DMX, the original walking one, was funny because we got crap for coming up with, $100 plus shoes. And our original name was ACG, and then for Reebok Advanced Concepts Group. And then 6 months into that, Nike launched All Conditions gear. We're like, we got to change our name. So that's where we came up with RAC for Reebok Advanced Concepts. But in that 6-month period, the rest of the company called us the Any Cost Group because we would do all these, over $100.
That blank check down there.
Yeah, the $100 concepts. And so we secretly started to work on DMX walking, which was an evolution of what Reebok had done with Energy Air. I don't know if any of you guys even remember that. So we figured out how to make a technology for $1.50 a pair, which at that time was like unheard of. And so it went into $65 to $75 shoes. And it was a great story, is that the original mold to make DMX, the first prototype part, because we had all these movable pieces in it, because we really didn't know what we were doing. We had all these different air passageways and things, so we made 3 different slugs so you could change it out and change the configuration of it. And it was going to be a $30,000 mold. And we're like, holy shit, we don't have that kind of budget, right? And everybody's like, no, you guys can't spend $30,000. But Peter and Paul and I sat down and we figured out each one of us had $10,000 signing power. So we had those guys send us 3 separate invoices, and we each signed off on our individual invoices that squeaked through the system to make this thing. And then when it launched, we sold 14 million pairs.
Yeah. So you made that 30,000 back.
Yeah, they liked us after that. But right until that moment, like, we're not giving you a dime.
Now the Instapump Fury is coming back with Boost in the sole. This must be an exciting time to see it back and sort of changed.
Yeah, it was an interesting thing when it was first proposed to me from the Reebok squad. They're like, hey, we're gonna try to do this. And I was like, ooh, this is gonna be fun. Adidas isn't gonna like that. But it wound its way politically through the company, and the thing just launched, and the reception's been amazing to it, because it kind of makes total sense, since it's one company, even though it's separated, but it helps both out, because it's the Boost right now, I think, is the ultimate cushioning midsole in the industry. And it's what we would have done back in the day when we were building the Fury. Why wouldn't we put the best midsole material together with the best upper fit system and create this amazing thing? And that's kind of what this has done. So it kind of charts new ground of the hybridization of the two companies' techs and moves the Fury into present day times.
It's still ahead of the time.
Oh yeah.
It's in the 30-30 or something.
I always say, when I talk to young designers, I'm like, back in those days when I saw stuff come out of Nike, I was like, I wish I did that. That's so freaking cool. And so that was another motivation when things would come out of other brands. Like, I wish I did that. That's so cool. And I haven't seen much where I'm absolutely like, I wish I did that. And the Fury was one of those things. And as cool as it was 25 years ago. Come on, young guys, kick my ass. Show me something amazing where I'm like, holy shit, I wish I did that. So that's my challenge, to want to be designers.
What's the last sneaker design that really blew you away?
Ooh.
You can't say one of your own shoes, though.
Damn it. I don't know. It's a tough one to look back.
Well, that's the challenge. I know we got a couple of industrial designers in the house and students and that sort of thing. So Steven's laid down the gauntlet. You guys have got to raise the challenge.
Show me the future.
There we go. Now, from Reebok, you spent some time at Fila. So we're just jumping all around every brand here. And at Fila, you designed a Grant Hill sneaker and spent some time with Grant Hill to design that.
It was funny. They had the design team work on the next Grant Hill. And unbeknownst to us, we had different offices, I was based in the Portland office at that point. They had an office in New York. They had an office in Utah. No, Colorado. It was in Boulder. And then they had an office down in LA. And we didn't know it, but they tasked each office to create the next Grant Hill. So we were all competing against each other, but we didn't know it. Since I was working up in the office in Portland, and it was a lot of ex-Nike guys on that team, it was the Nike mentality of like, go immerse yourself with the athlete, get all you can out of him, and then that becomes the DNA to what the product becomes. So you're serving the athlete and giving him exactly what he's after. The Italian mentality was just style it and we'll pick one. And that's what they did. And mine was like the second option, and it never went to market. And a year ago, I posted a bunch of my sketches on my Instagram. I kind of it was Christmas holiday, I was bored, so I'm like, it might be fun, dig out that old Fila stuff and just start throwing it out there. And because it's been 10, 12 years since that stuff, when I was designing it, and none of it went to market really, so I just started throwing the drawings out for 3 days straight. I went on this binge of some of my old Fila stuff, and part of it was that whole Grant Hill project, all the designs, the first pullovers, and then the second to last sample. And it was really interesting. 3 weeks ago, one of my followers on Instagram sends me a picture of the Grant Hill shoe in his hand, and I was like, where did you get that? And he's like, they just released it in Korea. And I'm like, that was my 1996 Grant Hill that never went to market. So I guess, I don't know if it's because, I always say it's like Hansel from Zoolander. Steven's so hot right now. Let's put out one of his designs that he did for us, 15 years ago, and see how it goes. So it was a surprise to see it. I never expected it to ever see it in the marketplace. So.
Yeah, it's a really unusual circumstance. It's something I've never really heard about happening before.
I never have either. I was like, what the hell? So I called up my Korean buddies. I'm like, can you get me a pair? So they sent me a pair last week. They did a pretty good job. They took all the 2A cushioning out, though. But
hey, they're never going to match up with your work. Now, from Fila, we're going to go to Nike, which is where you did the Zoom Streak Spectrum, which we are all familiar with more recently as a Supreme collab. But that was your original design with the flames. How did it all come to be?
Yeah, so Inotani-san, who was my marketing guy, I have a real affinity for Japan because I collect stuff. And much like the Japanese, I go deep. When I'm into something, I'm way into it. I got to have it all. And so Inotani-san, every time I would come to Japan, he'd be, oh, Steven-san, I found a new shop for you. Amazing stuff. I'm like, cool, let's go. So rather than, go right to work, we went and screwed around and went vintage shopping and stuff. So he's like, very good vintage shop, excellent new clothing. I'm like, great, let's buy it all. So I'd load up my suitcase with all this stuff. So Inotani and I were out shopping around, and we were working on this new racing flat. And everything we did was always briefed just for Japan. Eventually, somehow, it ended up becoming a racing flat for the rest of the world. So this one, the Spectrum, was one of those where we briefed it for Japan, for Ekiden runners, for I don't know if you know the Ekiden race, but it's 14 to 17-year-old high school and middle school runners, and it's a week-long relay race, and it's nationally televised. It's a big deal there. But that's what that shoe was kind of focused on. And Inotani-san knew how much I like cars and hot rods. He's like, oh, I found these stickers that are flames like a hot rod. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And he goes, want to put them on the shoe? I'm like, sure. So I recreated them in Illustrator and tweaked the forms a little bit, and I laid it on the vamp of the shoe, and it came out, and people were like, well, what's this hot rod? Because runners are pretty conservative. What's this flame thing all about? So then Paula Radcliffe was one of the Nike athletes at that point. And so she was like, I'll try those. Those look pretty cool. So she wears them and breaks the women's world record in marathon and half marathon in them. And I'm like, you are not who that shoe was meant for, but hey, that's great. It worked for you.
The flames made them go faster, though, right?
Definitely. And it's very funny. So all of this loops back as a common thread that winds through my career. Because when I was a kid, I wanted the New Balance Super Comp. And I don't know if you know the original one, but it went from red to orange to yellow. And I remember seeing the upperclassmen running in it. It looked like their feet were on fire. And when it came down to the tip and toe on the Fury, that's my homage to the New Balance Super Comp. It had this split tip that looked like a snake tongue. And when we were trying to do the final version of the Fury toe, it was from that New Balance shoe. And then the Fury also looked like fire. And then when it came to the Spectrum, it was fire.
It was literally fire, right.
And so when I saw that Supreme was going to release that thing, I'm like scratching my head, like of all the ones that they could get out of the Nike archive, why my weird Japanese racing shoe? But you know what? The thing came out and it went crazy, and it was like, wow, that thing launched in 2003, and here it is, still relevant. 2019, it was just amazing.
That's another common thread that we have. The Instapump's still on the shelves. All those New Balance are still on the shelves. The Grand Hill Filas just came back. Your Zoom Street Spectrum is one of the hottest sneakers of the last 12 months. It must be quite an unusual feeling for you to see everything that you've done all at once, really.
It's really bizarre, and it's bizarre to go to a shop and you see your 32, 33 years of your career all competing against itself. You're like, ooh. I never set out, I always say, I never set out to create these icons of this industry. I set out to make the best thing I could at that moment in time. And time has shown it was the right thing to do, because here they are, spanning 33 years of it. Still relevant. Some of them selling way more than they did originally. I mean, it's incredible. It's Japan in particular. I can't go more than 10 feet with seeing somebody in something I touched. I mean, and when I first got out of school and got my job at New Balance, everybody else who was in the design program went to go work at computer companies and biomed companies and stuff. And they're like, you're going to design sneakers? What a joke, And I'm like, well, you know what? You guys are going to design a medical device where 10 surgeons in the whole world will ever see it. I can go anywhere in the world. This is what I said to him back then. I can go anywhere in the world and see somebody who appreciated my design and spent the money. And every time I see somebody and when I want to go up and like, thank you for appreciating my design. It means a lot to me, because they're your children. At the end of the day, they're your children. And I look at like the 574 and the Fury. It's like they've grown up and made something of themselves, kind of like what I did for my parents, where they didn't know what the hell was going to happen with me. What are we going to do with the kid who's got the art degree? They're like, oh, he's going to be like a painter and work at the grocery store for the rest of his life. Meanwhile, my brother is an Ivy League professor. And I'm like, well, I
you did all right.
Did all right.
So you do see a lot of your sneakers around wherever you go, but one sneaker that we don't see of yours all that often is a very rare Nike Presto, the Hello Kitty Presto. Who's familiar with the Hello Kitty Prestos? Wow, there's not many people. Okay, look, guys, just as a little...
Look it up.
Yeah, look it up. It's like one of the rarest Nike Prestos. And that was some of your work there.
Yeah, it was really interesting is I brought my lunch every day at Nike in a Hello Kitty lunch bag. I got it out, and I had the little Hello Kitty containers, very Japanese, popped everything out, everything, like my grapes were here, and my sandwich was here, and it was all in Hello Kitty things with the little slide-out tray with your fork and your spoon, and I ate my yogurt with my Hello Kitty spoon, and everybody thought I was insane, which they might have been right. And so I became known as like, oh yeah, that Steven, he likes Hello Kitty. And, in a company full of jocks, they're like, what the hell? Yeah, that guy. And so Mark Parker got approached by Sanrio for Hello Kitty's 35th birthday celebration. They were going to do some collabs with all these different companies to do these limited edition Hello Kitty anniversary products. And who's the first one he came to ask? It was like, hey, I know how much you like Hello Kitty. I got a fun project for you. I'm like, oh, perfect. And he explained it to me, and I was like, oh, yeah, this is going to be great. And so Hiroshi and I were supposed to work together on it, and I kind of got a weird little graphic from Hiroshi, and I'm like, okay, what do I do with that? And so I applied his to a Presto, did some color-ups of it, and then I went wild and did all my own versions. So I think in the end I did like 7 different versions of it, and then they narrowed it down to 5, which they made samples of. And then I think 4 actually went, and I say to retail loosely, but 4 went into the marketplace. So the original plan was each style was going to be 500 pairs only, and only in Japan, and it was just this big Hello Kitty expo they were going to be launched. And I never knew what happened to it. They got me my pairs. I'm like, cool, I got some, good, done. I'm back into the running, I'll work on that. But I didn't know that they only made like 12 to 24 pairs of each style. And then they gave them out just to Sanrio employees, families, like execs and stuff. So later, Instagram, I post some pictures, and people are like, oh, whoa, you have those? They only made blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. I thought they made 500. And so Leon, who's from Melbourne,
yep, he's from Australia,
Prestology, reaches out to me, yo, mate, you got any left? And he goes, those things are selling for $1,000 a pair, mate. And I'm like,
that's pretty good with the accent, by the way.
What? And he's like, I'd love to meet you and talk to you all about it. I'm like, okay, cool. And so in the meantime, I sold mine through Instagram to some people in Singapore, and I bought a motorcycle, which was really cool. So I could have some Prestos rotting in my basement or have a bike to ride. So I'm like, okay, motorcycle, sneakers, gone. And Leon was like, you sold them for how much? I said, I don't know, like $1,500-$1,600. Oh, I'd have given you $4,000 for them. And I'm like, oh, well, yeah, anything over 0 is a win for me. I was happy. And he's like, I've been looking for those things for 5 years. And I'm like, keep looking, because they're out there somewhere now.
They're in Singapore somewhere.
But now, I had all the prototypes still with the sample tags on them and everything. I mean, he would have like killed for those things. So I at least printed out the original Illustrator renderings and things that I did and signed them for him. So he was at least happy with that.
That's good, though. I mean, I'm sure he appreciated that. Yeah. Now, does anyone know where Steven's currently working? So we're kind of not really allowed to talk about it. About the work that Steven does with this guy. He's a famous guy. He makes these great songs. He wears this red hat that people don't really like. He makes music in Wyoming. How did you come to work with this person, Steve?
So, I'm bound by a lot of secrecy agreements and non-disclosures and stuff. So, the best I can say is I got a phone call one night, and it was him, and he asked me to come design with him, and I was like, okay. So next thing I know, that's what I was doing, and I couldn't talk about it. So it was like being in the CIA. I would disappear to California. My friends are like, what are you doing? I'm like, I got a different job. The only ones who ever knew were my wife and my mother. And my mother would be like, now I heard the girls at the beauty parlor talking about Kim. I'm like, oh, okay. She goes, I didn't tell them what you do. I'm like, good, don't. And so then, finally Kanye tweeted a few things. So the word, oh yeah, that guy, Kanye West. And so he kind of tweeted a few cryptic tweets out about me working for him. So at that point, I could kind of say, yeah, that's my job. But it's it's definitely some of the most fascinating times of my life. And that's about all I can comment on legally.
There was an article in Forbes. Who saw the article in Forbes? With the big circle of sneakers, and there was this guy standing in the middle. Can you tell us anything about that big circle of sneakers?
Not really, but there was a lot of them.
There were a lot of them. All right, now, thank you so much, everyone, for coming tonight. Thank you to Hype DC, of course. Hold off on the applause. I've got one more thing. Tonight, in store, it's 20% off everything just for tonight, you guys. Also, there's tote bags on the chairs there with a gift from Hype DC. So let's give it up for Hype DC. Thank you so much, Hype. Make sure you turn those registers over tonight, and we'll be here for another half hour or so. We've got a little photo wall over here too, so you can get your photos with Stephen or get a pair of sneakers signed. We're going to start with you, my man. So thanks very much. Thank you to our guest, Stephen Smith.